Hi, everyone. Welcome to PhD Summit and this session on live optimization hacks for PhD students. My name is Fane Mensah, and I'm probably have to say, a life scientist turned moderator facilitator. I co-founded the Science Entrepreneur Club, and I'm now working at Synthase, where I run the computer-aided biology community, which is a focus network for people that are working in the 21st century tools in the lab. And yeah, I'm really glad to be with Philip. We're going to talk about our life experiences. We're going to talk about how we've gone into our roles. But I think most importantly, also trying to give you a bit more insights into how you can get the best out of your PhDs, and especially if you're interested in transitioning from academia. So Philip, can you give us a little bit of introduction about yourself? Who are you? Who's Philip?
Hi everyone. First, thanks Fane for the nice introduction, and thanks for having me. Really cool to be here. And so, in short, I'm French-German, bioengineering by training, and then instead of doing my PhD, I started a company right after graduating, so La Biotech, kind of the biggest media for the biotech industry in Europe. And I kind of stepped down as CEO now, preparing my next move. And so during that transition, I explored quite a lot on life optimization, how to run a company when you start at 22, and kind of optimizing your life around that. And then also I've had quite a few PhDs in the team, and so I had a few ideas and quite a lot of thoughts about PhD or not, and how to optimize that. So yeah, really glad to be talking about that.
Awesome. So both PhDs background. So I did a PhD in medicine, immunology, but I was really interested in communication very early on social media, trying to find out and communicate my science with other scientists, and also patients based on my research project. But you kicked something really interesting off, which is labiotech.eu, and it's quite a big thing in biotech, and it's quite inspiring. But my question was really like, why did you start it, and how did it happen?
It's a good question. Honestly, kind of by mistake. As I said, I was studying bioengineering. Was one of my best buddies, working with the co-founder of the company. We're actually the first guys we talked to in the bachelor. You come into that room awkward, you don't know where to sit, and you just sit next to randomly someone. And actually, that was Joachim. Yeah. Both of us were very entrepreneurial and very curious, and so we're very frustrated in how you can read about the industry. And we thought, oh, we're students, we're a master student at that time. We have a bit of time, so we started a blog about French biotech. That's where the name comes from. It's labiotech.fr. Okay. And then actually we didn't know what to do for holidays. And so we both like to cycle and to do a Tour de France. So we did a Tour de France of the biotech companies and published a documentary movie. Actually, with friends. And then we did one in the UK, in Boston, in Germany, Denmark, a few around the world. And actually, just before we graduated, kind of was hard to decide what to do. I mean, we could have done PhDs, we could have started working in industry, but then we had this kind of it was a non-profit at the beginning, which worked quite well. And we thought for 6 months, kind of looked into it, could we do a business out of it? And then just started brainstorming and thought, okay, let's try it out. We were both, I think, 22. He was maybe 23. Had never worked in our life, and I was in Boston at that time. He was in Heidelberg, and we thought, okay, let's try it out. And so we took a map of Europe, literally, and looked where could we be based. We kind of put a black area around France. We didn't, because we were already kind of based in France, and we knew we would get friends. We wanted to build something European or global, and so we looked everywhere, and then we ended up in Berlin, and we bootstrapped it from nothing. Worked in a cafe at the beginning, just a bit of advertisement to pay an office, hire some interns, and we didn't pay ourselves for 18 months, really surviving.
Oh, wow.
And taking the platform kind of off the ground, building a bit of readership, and then raising a first round of money, hiring employees, growing the platform. And yeah, now what I mentioned now, it's a company with over 10 people in the team, over 200,000 readers a month, and in Europe, quite well established.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite funny because in the beginning you mentioned you're like entrepreneurial and curious. So let's today just bombard it and call that entreprecurious. Yeah. So just design a new word, entreprecurious. But that's not just it, right? You can't just be entrepreneurial and curious. There are a lot of other skill sets, and especially because you're working in communication, that's absolutely key. How do you go about, how do you, for example, connect with a biotech leader and say, hey, I'm going to write a piece, or I want to write a piece about your product or service?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I was about to, when you mentioned that, I think networking is a crucial element, and I think it's one that is typically underestimated, especially for PhD students. And so one thing that we saw from the very beginning, we had to network to meet those people and kind of write an article. So and one thing my dean at the university told us, like, the university will always only bring you 50% of the value. The other 50% you have to go out and find it. And networking was a critical element to that. And then we just tried it out. And somehow, first event, you go there, you are in the corner, and then you get your first business card, and you're like, wow, I got the business card, so proud. And then you do it again and again, and then it becomes better. And so ultimately, I mean, when you create a community, I mean, Fane, you're super good at that as well. It's a lot about networking. It's about who stands behind, who can you tap into, who gives you special access. If you're running an event, how do you bring together a community? And so Labiotech was a lot about that. I mean, in the front page, it looks like, it's an interview, an article, but actually the whole work behind to get this piece, to get the whole context, it's a lot through networking. So we're doing a lot of that. But but deep down, it's not like you have to force yourself. I think, honestly, but I was telling the story on the bike tour. It was not like we're forcing ourselves. I mean, at the end, you meet amazing people. You are like, I will tell a little story, but you meet like the best VC CEOs. We're 22. We arrive on our bike on a short in the summer, and we talk to them like 1 hour. And you just want to learn from amazing people. And it's deep down, it still comes down to that curiosity. If you want to learn and be curious and meet amazing people, networking is the best way. And I think seeing it that way versus seeing it, I need to collect business card, it's a much easier and more natural way. Just be interested and be willing to learn from people who have figured out. And the funny story on that is, we arrived at Sophie Nova Partners. Denis Luquin was the boss of Sophie Nova, so one of the biggest venture firm in Europe for biotech. And we arrived in short in his office. And true story, still today, never anyone appeared in short in his office. And so 2 years later, he met Joachim and said, oh, you're the guy in short.
Yeah.
So, that's so funny.
You left an impression.
He was an amazing guy. So.
Yeah, you left an impression though. But I think you mentioned about networking. I think that's something that is so important, especially when you're a PhD or when you're a postdoc. Obviously, you go to conferences, you meet people. But it also depends on what can you talk about. It needs to be interesting. And my question for you is also like, in the biotech, you meet all these great people, but it's not just about meeting them. It's also creating great stories that allow people to read or listen to it. How do you go about that? Because I love meeting all these great industry professionals and these investors and connecting with them. That is great. But having that conversation, which is basically good for your readers, and putting that out, that's a big challenge, right?
No, it is. But it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, because it gave us a reason to meet with these amazing people. Yeah. You say, oh, I will interview you. Doesn't cost you anything. Just half an hour of your time, and then you get a few thousand readers reading it. It's pretty attractive proposition to get to talk to them, and then you can network and continue building the relationship. But definitely, I mean, I'm not journalist by training. We were not. It took us a long time to figure out how to do that properly. But deep down, I still think it's the same thing. It's like, are you curious? Do you find the amazing stories? And then if you find the amazing stories, just share it. Share your enthusiasm for the field. Yeah. And that works well. And then the second thing, I think what you mentioned on being confident to talking to people and being interesting, I think we all have a super interesting story to tell. It's not because you're not Nobel Prize that you don't have anything interesting to say. Yeah. And I think I would say it's mostly a switch that you have to do internally, as in like telling yourself, I have something interesting to say, and I can always learn from someone, but also teach them and share. And once you're in that mindset, it's very different. And so, of course, I mean, when you're 22 or whatever, 25, 30s, you're not super expert, but you've probably seen something in a space that where you can discuss, or whatever. You've read a piece of news that the other person haven't read, or you can always share some kind of insight and context. And so that's what we figure out. I mean, we talk to Niluka or these kind of guys that, like, I mean, they've seen quite a lot, but still somehow you can still, share something that they don't know, and or share a cool startup you've met and they haven't heard of. There's always something to share, I think, and it comes down, I think, to a bit of confidence, and I think it's really a positive feedback loop. It's once you get it started, once you've done it, once you've seen that you can have interesting conversation, once you continue, then it continues, and the more you talk to interesting people, the more you learn, and then it's a very good positive feedback loop, and then it's really, really powerful.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that that I also explain, like, what you just said about having something to offer is so important, because I can remember my first big networking event. I was invited by a mutual contact of mine, and we went to this really nice place, nice drinks, nice food. It was very impressive, and you had like CEOs of GSK, CTOs of other pharma companies, investors, all various high profile people. And I was like, that I'm only a PhD student. I was in my second year of my PhD, and I was like, I'm only a PhD student. All these hot shots people, how do I talk with them? How do I get engaging with them? And I was so surprised by the fact that I just talked about, like, well, I'm a PhD student, and this is my research product, which is quite niche, but I'm interested in the biotech industry. I'm interested in biopharma. I'm interested into learning more about your journey. So having that confidence that you can, as a young person, can speak about your expertise or your experience, as you mentioned, but also giving them the opportunity to talk, I think makes a really good combination, because as scientists, we always love to talk about stuff. We love to talk about a research project. We also talk about what we're doing. But I think an important thing is also to listen. And I think if you have that nice hybrid, that nice combination of telling your expertise and listening to what other people have got to offer, makes you a good network, and that allows you to connect with. And it was very impressive for me in the first, and I was like, when I went out of that room, I was like, whoa, what happened to me? A whole new life just switched on for me. So what you're saying, I think it's very important. I think that's a good message for PhDs to just go out there and try it. Yeah.
And worst case, it doesn't work.
You
just try 10 times, and if it doesn't work after the 10th time, maybe change a bit something, but otherwise, let's just try it out. There's not much to lose, but there's a lot to win.
Yeah. So obviously you've met a lot of these different companies. Biotech is quite well known. I know, at least in the biotech industry, in the biopharm industry, there are always nice articles coming out. How do you keep innovating? How do you keep making sure that you're reaching your audience in the right way, that they're getting the content that you basically want to share with them, whether it's cell and gene therapy or whether it's any type of new technology is coming in?
Yeah, no, it's a question we're always asking ourselves, like, how can we do better? And I think deep down is our job is really to share our enthusiasm for the field and to really make biotech exciting. And so how can we do that better? And so we're always trying things out. That's also where the scientific approach helps a lot. Even for running a media company, it's really testing. You make your hypothesis, you make your tests, you get your results, you analyze, repeat. And we do that on articles as well. And the great thing about being a digital media is that you have quite a lot of data. So you can say on an article on a specific topic, okay, this topic is more interesting than others. You have more engagement. You have, I don't know, whatever. You can test the format. You can start A/B testing of testing 2 different versions. But also then we were playing with different formats like videos, like actually we have never tried podcasts, but it was on the list, but with videos, with long articles, short articles, infographics. You always try out and doing it better. And it's also how much resources do you have to do that? And so as we're growing, we're investing more and more into editorial.
Yeah.
We had a team of 3 full-time journalists plus a lot of freelancers on the side. This gives you a bit more freedom to go more in depth or do and try more things out. And at the end, you know, it's like in a PhD, like you have a lot of ideas of things to try out. And usually it's not the ideas that are missing, it's really the execution part.
Yeah.
And so really, how do you prioritize the right thing, try out the right thing, and then always make sure that the end goal is serving the readers, making them more interested in biotech. And as long as you keep that vision, then you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about you took a step back. You went traveling. I remember we were on a call, I think a couple of months ago, and you were in the US, and you said, like, you know what, Fane, I took a step back. I want to explore my next venture. And I think also for the listeners, PhDs, it's a difficult thing to just take a step back and say, okay, what am I going to do next? Am I going to do a postdoc? Am I going into biotech? Am I going to science communication? Am I going to service providers and use my scientific knowledge and expertise? So there's always these questions that people are asking themselves. How did you experience stepping back and just putting everything in front of you and say, okay, let me just get everything down. What am I going to do next?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, just to give a bit of context, but yeah, I stepped down in June 2019, and first, I mean, the 5 years were quite intense. It was an intense period, like a lot of ups and downs. So thought, like, at first, I want to really take perspective, breathe a bit, and then travel around, meeting people I love, friends, family, wherever, and thinking about the next move. And so I told myself, okay, let's take a bit more than 12 months, kind of arbitrary, and see what comes out of it. And really the takeaways here is, first, taking time to figure it out is super valuable. I think it's something that is quite undervalued, and because, I mean, figuring out things takes time in general. There is an uncompressible time it takes talking to 10, 20 people and figuring out. So there's a time component there. And the second thing I want to say is, there is the fear of missing out, fear of running out of time. And actually, the way I see it is really, it was about investing the time. If you invest 6 months to take the right decision, and how the decision is for the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, what's your return on the 6 months? And that's how I looked at it. And I cannot share, I mean, I can share the next move. It's basically confirmed, but I cannot share it publicly yet.
Yeah.
I have a very, very good feeling, and I'm super excited about it. But I cannot share really the return yet over like 3-5 years, but I have a very good feeling on that side.
Awesome.
So I think deep down, yeah, taking the time is great. Don't fear of running out or being behind. You know, taking the long view, usually you're the winner at the end. Usually it's not by taking all the shortcuts that you go faster. It's by being sure where you're going and then going there properly. And so this worked really well.
Yeah, good. Another question. You've met a lot of industry professionals, and I get the question quite a lot when people that either wanted to do a PhD or already doing a PhD, and they're like, what type of jobs can I go into? And do I need a PhD to go into biotech, or do I need to be a PhD to become a founder? What was your take on that? And then just think about the people that you've met, but also what your personal experience has been in your situation.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear your part as well on that. So on PhD, it's a very good question, and I will connect it to networking as well. I think, you know, doing a PhD for me was a question that I asked myself a lot. My dad is a PhD and researcher, has been researching his whole life at INRA in France on microbiome. And so I've kind of been born in that. He has been talking to me about bacteria since I'm 5. And because it was obvious that I would somehow end in science. But there's always this question, like, yeah, should you do a PhD or not? And for me, the best way to figure it out was really talking to people. So network, but talking to people who have faced a similar challenge and have figured out 2-3 years before.
Yeah.
And deep down, I think it's something that I applied as well for the company, for whatever I'm doing, kind of what is someone who has figured out the same challenge you had, but who is already 2-3 years ahead, to have a bit of perspective and have a bit of clarity on the decision. And so, but that was at uni, obviously very little network to do that. But basically what I did, finding some graduates who already did the choice and figuring it out. For me, the rationale on the PhD or not, a lot of people told me, yeah, you need to do a PhD or not. Myself, I am very entrepreneurial from my youngest age. I've started my first kind of project company, I was 11. By the time I studied, I started 5 or 6. I knew I love to start things. I love to build things. I love when it's more applied and it reaches people. So really on the fundamental science, I love the science, but it's not what I love to do. I love to apply it and do something out of it. And so it was pretty clear from the beginning that engineering, bioengineering is something that I love. And then it was pretty clear to me that doing the pipetting in the lab, and maybe if it was fully automated, it would be more attractive, but doing the pipetting was not the thing for me. Obviously, I did a few internships where I could just feel it. But then the question is still like, oh yeah, you want to do, let's say I want to translate science or do business in biotech. Then you still have the answer like, oh, you need to be a PhD because you need to be really solid in science. And then you do MBA and then you're 35 and then you can start working. I was like, oh, okay, let's try a little shortcut on that one. And let's try to do it a bit faster. And like at the university, I could do bioengineering, and then I could choose a major, which was science, marketing, or bioproduction, and all business basically, but I took the business one. And so basically it's kind of accelerated MBA, kind of master's plus MBA.
Okay, that's good.
Some of them now in Europe as well, kind of bio-entrepreneurial masters or bio-entrepreneurship masters. And that was a really good way to kind of bridge the gap and then figuring out. And then I always believe that learning by doing is a very good way versus studying 10 years. And I think, for example, entrepreneurial, I mean, the only way to really learn how this works is to be a founder. And then I was lucky to have that opportunity and to connect on that. But honestly, I think deep down, I don't regret it. So where I'm standing now, I think I'm very happy with where I'm standing now, and probably otherwise I would have been just finishing my PhD. But I think it's still a good choice. It's deep down, I think the most important is, there is no ideal path. There's no like perfect path. It's really more like, does it make you tick? Are you happy to go out of bed every morning to go to do a PhD? But if you know it's not what you really want to do, or if you know you don't want to stay in research for 10 years and it's already like not that attractive to you, probably think about it. And this connects to the two other parts to wrap up. Take the time to sense your gut. I meditate a lot and I call that just sensing my gut, but really sense your gut feeling. Like in the morning when you wake up and you shower, what are you dreaming about? Are you dreaming about doing fundamental research, or are you dreaming about applications? And then network at the end to meet, to get honest feedback and to figure it out. And you, how was it for you?
This is a similar starting story. My dad, my dad wasn't a PhD, but to be fair, like
do you regret it?
No, I don't regret it. And I'm explain to you why I didn't regret it, because when I was at high school in the Netherlands, I loved doing biology. And the next step for me was, a study in biological area. So I did biomedical sciences in my bachelor's. And then doing my bachelor's, I got introduced to immunology. And then the next easy step was, I'm going to do a master. So I did a master's in infectious disease and immunology. And then you've done the master's and you think, what's the next step? Oh, the next step is doing a PhD. So I really rolled into not even think about what I wanted to do. I really rolled in it's the normal next step to do bachelor's, master's, PhD. And it was literally in my PhD, in my second year, that I thought, like, do I want to be a bench scientist? Because doing a PhD, you're going to really find out, okay, this is how a scientist's lives look like. You need to apply for grants, you need to do the manual work in the lab, you go to conferences, you write papers, and so on. And combining all of that, I realized, like, I love the science, just like you. I absolutely love the science, but discussing about it and talking about it and finding collaborators to really find ways in unveiling questions that you had, hypotheses. And unlike you, I did like working in the lab. I was quite comfortable in the lab and I enjoyed doing it. It was on my own. And if I've got something that I needed to focus on, it was quite easy to focus on. But then you come to a certain point, as you mentioned, like you're in the shower and you think, like, what do I really want to do? But also think about, where can I have the best impact? That's what I was always thinking about. Where can I as a person have the best impact? And I already knew I love conferences. I love speaking to people. So I was like, can I do something with communication? Can I do something with communities? And that's for me. I really started already in my second year of my PhD thinking about in life. And I think for a lot of PhDs, that always happens after they've done a PhD. They do a PhD and then they like, okay, I'm going to do a postdoc, and then they do a postdoc, and I think, like, okay, what is the next step? And then they transition or somehow. So I'm really happy that I did a PhD for the one important reason is that if I go to networking events and you are in the biopharma industry and you start speaking to people, it is something like, oh yeah, where did you do your PhD? Oh, Cambridge, or at MIT, or at Oxford, or at UCL. So there is some type of a prestige that you've got when you've got a PhD, where it's really about people finding out, okay, you've done a PhD, so I can talk to you about this discipline, or you've got a PhD, so I can do this. And as you said, I think a lot of biotech founders in Silicon Valley and in the East Coast and in Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts, they all have PhDs. So the expertise that you get from your PhD is absolutely vital. But I have to say, speaking to a lot of people, it's not a must. And I agree with you. It really depends on, like, how do you feel you're going to make an impact, or what do you feel that you want to do in the future? So I didn't regret it, but I'm happy that I've got a PhD. Don't get me wrong. And it helps. It definitely helps. And it also makes it easier for you to transition, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like the part you took the time to feel what you like. And I think that's exactly the thing. And the point you made on, like, start thinking earlier is probably a very good advice as well. And don't be afraid of asking you the questions. Worst, the answer that is, oh yeah, I really want to do a PhD, and it would just comfort you in your answer. Or not. But I think asking these fundamental questions bring you forward anyway. I mean, to wrap up on what you asked on like taking the transition phase, I went quite extreme of, like, questioning broad. Like I diverged like pretty broad, and the first step was first not talking to anyone for 6 months. I mean, talking to people, but professionally not talking or working for 6 months, and just letting my thoughts and my brain and all the ideas out, and reading my notes. And then the first thing I did was, like, talking to 50 people and asking for honest feedback of where do they see me, who I should talk to, and like, instead of pitching something, telling them why and what do they see. And this was pretty intense. Diverged, like, I cannot do it. Quite bored. But diverging and then converging. And this is really, it's really powerful.
Absolutely. I can remember what I did. I did 3 things. I literally took a paper and I sat down. This is something I really enjoy doing. This is something I'm good at doing. This is something that I don't like doing. And then this is something that I hope I could do, but I need to have the skills for that. So if you do that, you can basically really pinpoint yourself, and then you can basically find out, and as you said, you just go out and speak to people, say, you know what, I love doing this, but I don't have the skill set. How do I get that? And then that's where the network really comes in place.
That's good.
So,
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that part on the shower part is really important, but you cannot figure everything out in the shower, or you have to take a really long shower.
Yeah.
There is a part of shower, it's kind of sensing what's the top level, but then there's a part of, like, you need to sit at the desk, remove your phone without your laptop, and during 3 hours you think and you go more in depth and you structure your thoughts. Usually it starts with a shower and then you go deep. But that's the work that is kind of missing. I think that's where a lot of value is created. I mean, deep down and on, we should talk about life optimization, but
yeah,
one part on that, on like planning, on prioritization, on going more in depth is, I think it's one of the core thing on life optimization where you can, it's really a core structure where you can build everything on top. I mean, the blog post we talked about is, I think, one big part. I mean, everything else it can be built on top once you are able to set like proper goals that align with your values. Then the execution is much easier. And then if you're trying to sleep 10 minutes more, 10 minutes less, or if you're trying to like do push-ups or do abs or whatever, I mean, this is really a detailed level. On the fundamental level, it's about prioritization. It's about figuring out what is good and setting up the right goal and then executing everything.
Yeah. So, Philip, I think we're coming to the end of our session. Just for the listeners and the people there, is there a final tip that you'd like to share with them? Something that you said, okay, I'd love if I knew that before I went through this journey, that you basically can share based on your experience.
Yeah. I would share a tip on life optimization and how I got into that. The story is, I was in Boston finishing my studies. I was doing a master thesis, starting a company at the same time. And, Boston is quite high energy. And I love this, but I just tried to work as much as possible and like started working every day and taking calls and whatever, until I basically burned out after 5 months. So I burned out even before starting a company, which I don't recommend to people. It's not very pleasant. But I learned a lot from that moment. And that's really when I started to optimize a lot of things and really kind of life-work balance. That's when I learned about these concepts and kind of running. I mean, what is the short-term versus long-term efficiency, or about productivity, about organization, about optimization. And so one tip I would have for PhD students is that I think deep down, there's a lot of similarities with running a company. So kind of you have your own project, a lot of autonomy, a lot of responsibility. It's very intense. So quite long-term, 4 years, it's quite a long-term time horizon. And to be really productive in that, you have to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself first, it's very hard to take care of others or to be productive. And look on a year scale that is a bit longer. And once you look at this, then you cut down some shortcuts, which can be like, for example, a lot of caffeine, just a simple example. It's quite a short-term thing because it fucks up your whole sleep. So it fucks up your recovery. And after 3 years, you realize that you're quite tired. So that's why I'm caffeine-free since January 2019. Good. Or sleeping.
I've always been caffeine-free, so.
That's amazing. But there's sleeping, I don't know, around 8 hours per night, exercising. And all of that, at the end, on the long term, it increases a lot your productivity. And I think also for a PhD, it will increase whatever decision you take, will improve your publication, will improve everything. And so I think having this realization, if you can take one takeaway, that it can help a lot your PhD as well by optimizing your life. And once you start getting into it, it's a bit of a mindset shift. Once you start getting into it, then it's super powerful. And once there's a positive feedback loop, then the effects are huge. And then there's a compounded value from every month you optimize, you have a huge compounded value. And that's then for the whole life. So I think.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for that. I've got a couple of small tips, but I definitely say start early thinking about your future. I also say every opportunity is an opportunity. So go out there, go and find your opportunities, because that could basically hand you your next job or your next venture or your next idea. And finally, I'd also like to say, don't underestimate what you learn in your PhD. Transferable skills are very, very valuable. And don't think like, oh, I can't do this because I've got an expertise in immunology or I've got expertise in bacteriology. There are loads of different things you can learn, and it makes you very interdisciplinary. So yeah, I'd like to end with that. Thanks a lot for your time, Philip.
Thanks, Fane.
It's great speaking to you.
So yeah, just if you want to go further, I think one question was, where can we find each other, or where can we find online? But yeah, I mean, you can find me on whatever, LinkedIn, Twitter, just Philip Hem, or I have a blog. And if you want to go deeper in life optimization, the blog I mentioned, it's quite detailed, and you can find inspiration of things to try and go further. Yeah.
Good.
And you, Fane, where can I find you?
Self-promotion.
Everywhere.
So important. Yeah. I have to say LinkedIn, Twitter. Also look out for computer biology community. There's a lot of great content on 21st century tools in the lab. So really looking at the future of our lab looks like through automation, software, data aggregation, and so on. But yeah, just reach out to us as well. We're more than happy to have a chat with you and speak about our experiences. So yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thanks.